Within the subject of context, urban design and cultural response across national borders, today's guest speaker certainly knows what comes after what came before. After World War II, architecture in Mexico was a bland blend of foreign imitations. Column culture, some called it. Buildings that, but for the fabulous murals adorning them, could have been done anywhere by any worshiper at the altar of Le Corbusier. Instead of reprising inappropriate international style from abroad, Ricardo Legaretto, honorary FAIA, rediscovered the wall culture of Native American architecture. He recoined a language that recognizes, quote, wall, rather than, quote, column, salutes the supremacy of solids over voids, and celebrates color and three-dimensional continuity. In doing so, he launched a uniquely international style of his own. The designer whose Camino Real hotels in Baja California and Cancun are among the late 20th century's serious architectural awakenings, and they can teach us how one takes the old and makes it radically new. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Ricardo Legaretto.
Good morning. I always feel rather uneasy when I receive an honor, and this is the second one I received from the AIA. Some years ago I was named honorary fellow, but I never thought that I could have the honor to talk to all of you, and it makes me nervous to do that. The title of the conference excites me substantially. Engaging society in vital ways. It's one of those phrases that we can say very easy, but it's difficult to do. So I was thinking, what could I say here? I was named to talk about design, and I thought by being a foreigner, but also by having worked in the United States, I would like to share with you some of my worries. I don't pretend to have the truth. As a matter of fact, I doubt if somebody has the truth about architecture. At least I'm sure I don't have it. But I would like to share those worries, tell you what I see, what we are doing in the office, and at least mention some of the things we are doing at this moment. How are we? Where are we going? And what ways we have to it. A couple of weeks ago, I was very impressed by two editorials of American magazines. One was from Progressive Architecture, talking about the role of the architect as a star, that the architect is becoming a public figure, is becoming well known. We look for that very strongly, but I think we have overdo it. I think that we paid very high price for that. We are in the middle of publicity, we're in the middle of being published, and we are almost ready to go to Michael Jackson to give us dancing lessons so we can be popular. The other one was in Architectural Record regarding the type of language we architects are using. And it seems that it happens the same every place in the world. We are creating a kind of a language that nobody understands us. And at the same time, we're building for society. The reason they impress me is because there's a great coincidence with my thoughts about architecture. It's on fashion right now to talk about the 500th anniversary of the so-called discovery of America. It's on fashion to talk about the year 2000. And I have been thinking very much about this. And going back, I thought it was good to find out what really, truly we architects have done in the 20th century to improve the way of living of society. And when I started to think about that, I started to get worried. And I must tell you, I'm basically an optimist. But I started to compare our profession with other activities. And if we compare ourselves with engineering, for example, what they have done in the 20th century, and I find that they open roads, they create radio, TV, communications, the airplane, jet, computers. A good number of that has really helped humanity to improve their way of living. I started to think about doctors, and we can find that, of course, they have added a good number of years to our life average. They have improved our health. They help people who are ill, and they even exaggerate, getting us involved in all these, I think, crazy programs of Fit for Life, in which we cannot eat nothing so we can be healthy. But anyhow, they have helped us substantially to have a better way of living. And then I look to architecture, and I ask myself, and all these comments I'm doing, I include myself. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm as mistaken as any of you. And I look at myself and I say, what we have done for it. And unfortunately, I see architecture a little more related with the economists and with politicians. Because we keep doing the same thing through the century. The economy in the world, not only through countries, but also in each one of our countries, is getting more money into fewer people. And I wonder if we are not getting better architecture for fewer people. I think that, unfortunately, we are really mixing up our values as professionals. What do I mean by this, and how can I explain it? And with all respect, I'm going to talk about Mexico, which is the country I know. But I am sure that with a little bit of imagination, you can relate the comments to the US or any other country. And I would like to take a look to how we used to live, or people used to live, in the beginning of the century, and what are we doing now. I want to tell you, yes, I recognize I'm a helpless romantic, but in this case, I'm not talking with a silly nostalgia. Honestly, I'm not looking to tell you that we should live the way we lived in the beginning of the century or on the 20s. No, I really want to be positive. I really would like to have a better life and help to create a better life on the 21st century. But I would like to take a look to what was before, to see what we can learn. And then after that analysis, I would like to show you how are we working in the office. Some examples, what are we looking for. So if we could start with the slides, please. First of all, what was Mexico in the 1900s? Can we put the slides, please? Mexico City was a wonderful city. I still remember once that in a family dinner, I said to my father, you know that this story about that the Aztecs should found Mexico City in the place in which they found the... No, that's mistaken. I think that's the other carousel, the one on my left, or the one of you. And I said that's the story that they should find an eagle eating a snake. That is the place to found the city. And I said to him, I think that was an absolutely crazy idea, because look the way we live. We live on the top of the mountains. We don't have water, we have pollution. It's dust, etc. And he said, Ricardo, you are completely mistaken. Mexico City was a marvelous city at the beginning of the century. It had water, it had a lake, it had mountains, it had all kinds of possibilities for good living. And as a matter of fact, we had a wonderful life. But we human beings, we were the ones who spoiled it. The scale of the city was really magnificent. The mountains were visible, and we had that really good way of living. It had... I think I'm having problems with it. I was talking about the engineering, but... Let me see. No.
Not getting a change.
At the end, at that time, the objective of architecture, which is really to do better buildings for a better life, it was now not separated for the daily life. Houses were also first quality. So there was a kind of an equilibrium in the city. You couldn't believe this was Mexico City in the 1910. We had all the influence from France, but it was a city with quality. The change of the streets started at the beginning of the century. If you study most of the changes of any of the streets in Mexico, they started at the beginning of the century. And we found that it was not only Mexico City, what we talk about being the country, and we say, yes, one thing is the quality of the urban life, but the country is second class. At that time there was no second class. It was a different kind of life, but everything was first class of living. And you can see here how people could live very well and in great quality. I wish I could have designed the city on the right. The quality of churches, of houses, has been always first class. Markets were the place where people used to get together. When I was in that market on the right, in the south of Mexico, and I asked a woman, and I said to her, why do you come to the market? And she said to me, I come here to see my friends. And if I sell something, that's all right, but if I don't sell, I don't care. Imagine that being said by the manager of a shopping center of our times. The way the aesthetics, and this is to me part of architecture, the way products were displayed in those markets, it was really taking care of beauty, of humanistic, and not the way it's seen in our time. The way people used to go to the markets also, again, had to do with the way of living. The spaces, the public spaces that we suffer so much now about having enough money or enough will to do really beautiful open spaces. That was part of it. The way people live on the old haciendas in Mexico, you can see here two examples of them. Again, the quality of life was every place. And it didn't have to do with money. We had the same difference of economics, but both lived as well as they could. The individuality of each one could happen in any kind of a street, on the mountains, on the valley, or wherever. The aesthetic values were there, how a group of roofs, or how a house in which you cannot distinguish if it was a party or the house was that way. It was a happy society. This is a beautiful example of what was going on at that time. This is a church. Again, I asked the same question, and I asked the priest, I said, Father, why did you paint these stairs in such a way that the rises are blue? And he said, it's very easy. He said, going to heaven is beautiful, and going down to hell is horrible. Even the cemeteries had that value, and now we have changed all that on the excuse of function, on the excuse of economics. So I asked myself, what happened? What happened with that wonderful country of Mexico, as wonderful as any other country in the world? What we did to it? What happened? And I find that what happened was that suddenly progress came in, and then industry, and then we talk about comfort, and under the excuse of comfort we became involved in the commercialism, the superficiality, and we lost our real values. And that is reflected in architecture as well as in another thing. So this wonderful country started to change substantially. And then we started to see how the streets were changed. The same downtown, under the excuse of progress, we brought in cars, we opened streets, we turned down buildings, we changed the city completely. Here are some photographs of the same streets 50 years apart. And then what happens? On your left, you have a house, a first-class house of the colonial times, and on your right, you have a contemporary house. And we can say, oh, well, that house was not done by architects, it was done by somebody else. And we say, and why? Why do we have the difference of shopping? And it's not only that we are not doing good architecture, we are a result of a society. And suddenly we find out that it's a completely different approach to do a shopping center or a department store today than it was before. The idea of living is completely different. And we can talk about whatever we could say about bad architecture or good architecture. But you can see two houses. What has happened to it? Is everything economic? I know that we have overpopulation, we have all these problems, but basically is the lack of culture and devotion of architects and people. How a square can really become a market and really be a beautiful place to shop, instead of a shopping center in Mexico City, which is a bad copy of a shopping center in any city of the United States. How we handle water, how water can be very well treated. It becomes part of the daily life, or it can be just a so-called design of architects. Look at the difference of the street, in which the things are really deformed completely, and we really find out that we are changing the world, but I'm afraid we are not changing it for good. We're talking a lot about integrating to the environment. What kind of environment you can find in that city on your right? Even on windows, This is a good example. On the right, you have a very low cost or a very poor window. And on your left, there's a restoration of the small towns in Mexico, which is getting closer to Disneyland and not to real Mexico. Even when we try to copy these things, and that's why I said at the beginning that I'm not inviting to copy. If we try to copy, then there's something artificial. And on the right, there's a colonial house restored to become a tourist restaurant. And there's something artificial in comparison to what we have as the original. How a church can really appear very clearly on the landscape as part of it. Architecture belongs to the landscape. I always remember a very beautiful definition that was given to me by a friend of mine. I said, Ricardo, you architects are really lucky. You are the only profession in which God gave you the opportunity to complete His work. He gave us earth, water, sky, plants, but He didn't build anything. So it's your responsibility to do it. And then he said to me, but please do it with art, not the way you're doing things. The difference of houses, I can tell you the house on the left costs less in comparison than the house on the right. And we can go on and on those examples of how we're missing, and we get into low-cost housing. On the left, this is the low-cost housing that was built in Mexico at the beginning of the century. And I can tell you, I will be very proud to live in one of these apartments. And on the right is what we are doing at this moment as low-cost housing. The way you used to enter these places, you had dignity. It was not luxury, but it had human dignity. One last example is very clear. It deserves a whole lecture on it. But it's what we have done, and it has been done in Spain, has been done in other parts of Europe, I'm afraid has been done in certain places of the United States, on the discourse of tourism, which we really have mixed up. I understand tourism as a possibility of traveling and interchange of culture and doing friends. And what we have ended up with tourism, with the massing tourists, is the manipulation of a group of people by a group of people who the only thing they care is to making money. We had this marvelous place in the Caribbean, which you may know, Cancun. This was the way Cancun was. And I still remember when we were there, we arrived, there was nothing. I was just driving, and my wife told me, and imagine, Ricardo, one day the architects will come and will ruin this place. And she was absolutely right. What we have done with that place is unforgivable. And by we, I understand all of us. I include investors, some of them from Japan, Europe, US, Mexicans, architects, developers, and people. And we have converted this magnificent place that at one time accepted magnificent architecture into a place which, with all my respect to the Mexican tourist department, is a nightmare. There's a few photographs of Cancun taken about 3 weeks ago, and I took about 3 rolls, and of course I only brought 10 photographs because it's too much, because we make like it. Look what a change of a place, what a misunderstanding of climate, of what people want to have when they go on vacation. And it goes on and on that way. And I say to myself, yes, we do have on the 20th century very good architecture. There is no doubt that we have extraordinary architecture done in the 20th century. I can also have 50 or 100 photographs of first-class architecture of the 20th century. So we haven't lost the talent. We have the talent, but we do not have the will. We don't have the will of doing things right for a better way of living. I'm afraid that we have the will, but we are building, as I said, for less people. We're building for developers. We're building for our own sake, and I include myself on that. We have all this quality architecture, and at the same time, I place the question if we're really working to have a better way of living, a better life on it. So, I have been thinking about this, and I want to tell you, not that I have solved the problem, but what we are doing. And I thought that a very good description of this, even if it is not applied directly to architecture, is something that Octavio Paz, the Mexican poet, wrote in relation to a clay pot. The clay pots that we all buy, and I include myself, you can see it here, and we use them as a decoration. And that artificial approach, he wrote about it. He was very much against that, and he said this: well presented doesn't fall from above, it grows from below. Ochre, color of burnt honey, color of the sun, buried 1,000 years ago and buried yesterday. Green and orange stripes cross her warm body. Belly of a pregnant woman, bird's neck. If you cover or discover her mouth with the palm of your hand, she answers with a deep sound, the sound of the water. If you knock her belly, it laughs like silver coins falling in the stones. Clay pot, don't place it in the rare objects shelf. It will not look right. Her beauty is related to the liquid inside of her and to the thirst that calms. Her beauty is physical. I see her, I touch her, I smell her, I hear her. If it's empty, I must fill it. If it's filled, I must empty her. I take her by the handle like a woman by the arm. I raise her. I bend it over a glass pouring water or milk. It is not an object to look at, but to give to drink. If somebody will say that of architecture, that is good architecture. So what we are doing in the office, and again I want to tell you that it's only an effort. I don't mean that we are doing the things, we are trying to do it, is to look back and really try to find out what are the real values of Mexico. And here again I'm referring to Mexico, and you can refer to any ones in the United States or another country. And with this, I made an experiment about 2 years ago, and now is the way the office is working, which is because of a presentation. I brought in a group of kids, about 21, 22, to make the presentation with me. The presentation was a success. I repeated a couple of times more. And then I took the decision of skipping a generation. And now my office, the average age in my office is about 25 years, 24. And that freshness brought me all those things about thinking of what we can do that to recover those values. How the buildings are going to look 50 years from now. Not in the next architectural magazine. How they are going to look, if somebody presents these buildings the way I'm doing today about the beginning of the century, will they look right? And I wonder about my buildings, and I get very worried. So I started to look for the real values of Mexico. And I thought that instead of bringing some different photographs of buildings and explain the plan and how it works, etc., and convince you that they are excellent, I thought that it was better to show you some of the things we're looking for and really go through them and see if I can more or less tell you what we're looking for. The first thing we look for is that an architecture should belong to a place. It really has to belong to it. In that case, on the right is in Cancun. Cancun was full of water, so the idea was that the hotel was surrounded by water. How in this other hotel we tried to integrate it to the mountain, and through this slope and all that, we achieved certain things of integration to the place. This factory in the middle of the desert, I tried to emphasize the desert. So instead of doing a landscape, we took the excavation that we had to do for the foundation, we create these hills, and then we cover the whole open space with the stones, and really emphasize the sense of being at the desert. With all the respect of the landscape architects, I have found the best landscape architect in the world, and his name is God. So in this case, I tried to disappear this house and leave the natural vegetation grow and have it really as part of the landscape. The other thing is it has to be human. You can see in my own photographs that we wait until Sunday afternoon where nobody's there so we can photograph our buildings. We think that human being destroys our buildings. And I think they should look all right. They should have the possibility of having people around them and look better. The idea of that scale of human, the idea that you feel all right in a place, in a building, in a space, is something that I'm always trying to look for, and I'm always trying to really solve in that way. It has to be functional. And by function, I always talk about two functions. One is the function, the physical function. The other one is the emotional one. When we were doing this project in Dallas, as a foreigner and as a naive foreigner, I suggest that we should design the underpass. And everybody told me, Ricardo, you're absolutely crazy. The highway department is impossible to deal with. They will not approve anything at all. I said, let me make an effort. I went to the highway department, and the meeting lasted half an hour, and they approved the underpass. And I thought that it was beautiful to take advantage and make something beautiful out of an underpass. When you're driving in the middle of that flat area, why don't you make typical functional space as an architectural element and as beauty? Two examples are so-called function. On the right is Ricardo Montalban's house, the Mexican artist that lives in Los Angeles. Why it functions on the way we usually understand it is that, as you may know, the hobby of people in Beverly Hills is to buy a telescope and watch the artists how they live. So he told me, Ricardo, please no windows to the outside. Please, I want a fortress that is a piece of sculpture. And that's what we try to do. On the right is an emergency stair in a hotel, highly criticized, but everybody uses. So you find out that people like to use these spaces, and they also like to criticize the architect. Another example of function is this factory for IBM. It's on the outskirts of a city in Mexico. And I suggested that instead of making landscape, they should lend the space, or the open space, to a farmer. So they grow corn, alfalfa, or whatever, and it changes according to the year. How an entrance gate can be also a beautiful place. The other thing that it worries me is I always have excuses with my clients for not doing elegant buildings because we don't have budget enough to do it. And I find that elegance has nothing to do with economics. So we're always trying to do elegant buildings, and the proportions to me is one of the bases of elegance, and I have a lot of problem getting the right proportions in the buildings. The corridor on your right was extremely discussed. It's a hotel, and we did it 10 feet, which is against all the regulations of the hotel people. But we were able to build that 10 feet wide instead of 6 feet by not having any finishings on it. We saved the wood paneling and all those things that we put on the hotels so they look elegant. The possibility of combining just color and scale to make it elegant, it's also something that we use a lot in the office. Another thing that intrigues me is mystery. Also, again, on the discourse of function, we have spoiled the sense of mystery, the sense of getting lost. The day we opened the Camino Real in Mexico, which is really complicated in levels and all that, a singer that was there, after a year, he was singing in a bar, and he was a very close friend of mine. So we went to celebrate the year-old of that hotel. And suddenly he said, you know, I have been working here for a year, and this morning I found a workman in one of the corridors. And he asked me, sir, do you know this place? I said, yes, I have been working here for a year. He said, please do me a favor. I work on the foundation, and I have never been able to get out. Could you tell me the way out? And here we are that we want to design a building in which we immediately know where the elevator is, where the stair is, how to get out, etc., etc. And then when we want to relax and we want to go on vacation, we go to the Greek islands to get lost. So it's something we are trying to recover. All that sense of mystery, of the change of life, what is behind, what is in front, what can happen after, at the end of those stairs or at the end of this ramp. What is all that about mystery in life? To be naive. We architects, we love to build up theories of why we do things. And I honestly don't have any reason and any explanation of why we do things. And why we open a window or a hole in the wall, because that was a tree that the owner loved. So we wanted to save the branch, and we did that perforation in there. The intimacy, it's another thing for Mexicans is very important. We are known for being happy people, to be able to go to parties. We are always identified with margaritas and tequila, but we always like intimacy, substantial intimacy in our life. And it's something in which wall and openings help a lot. How can you create that sense of human scale? It's through intimacy that you can do that. One thing we always like, again, this is another example of intimacy. This is a studio in the middle of the mountains. Places which you are really inspired to work with in. One thing we like in the office, and I say we like because I will take this opportunity to tell you that I'm convinced of the teamwork. I don't believe in genius. I don't believe in the individual who knows everything. So we work very much as a team. I am the one who is known, I'm the one who is here speaking, but it's behind me is a team. So please, I really would like you to know that it's not my merit. It's a group of young people that work with me. And we love to make very simple, bold statements. Sometimes they ask us if we like to frighten people, and I say yes, we like. That's very Mexican. We had that all the way from the pyramids. So we want to make very bold and very strong buildings. We love them. This is the same factory I was talking about. So we had to have some control of the rainwater. So we did these huge excavations, and then the endless walls. And in this case, we got inspired very much by Quirico. And you could say it's aggressive, and I could tell you, yes, maybe it is aggressive. or it is aggressive. The beauty, I cannot take out of my mind that beauty is a very important thing for us in the office. And I find that you can do beautiful things out of everything, and again, without any excuse of budget, etc. Shapes are purely emotional. I design by pure emotion. I don't have any intellectual approach to architecture. I just do it the way I like it. And how these shapes can really become part of the architecture for us is very natural on it. We like to have sense of humor. That's another very Mexican thing. I think we architects, we take ourselves very seriously, and we take clients very seriously. In this case, on your left, of course, the operator came to the hotel, and he came and said, we cannot accept that sloped wall because people will climb on it and they will fall, and they will sue us, etc., etc., etc. So we decided to put that huge sphere of plaster in there. But I thought it was too serious, so we put another one. And then we started to put plaster figures every place in the hotel. And I got to the point in which one day I told a man from the mountains that does things in stone for me, and I said, I don't think you're good enough to make a huge sphere for me in stone. He said, yes, I can do a very large one. So he asked for a down payment. I made a down payment. He disappeared for a year. And one day he appeared in my office with a truck in there. And he said, here's your stone. And the stone cannot go to any door, any space, so we had to leave it on the sidewalk. And there it is forever. On the left, on your left, this is a lap pool. And I confess I swim. But every time I swim, I find myself doing something stupid. And there's a lap pool in Los Angeles. So I decided that we could have a little bit of fun. And as you can see, at the end of the pool, there is that slot, and you see the trees behind. It's not that. It's a mirror. So every time you make the lap, you come out of the pool and you see yourself, you say to yourself, I'm crazy doing these things. Sense of humor, we keep it all the time, and we like to laugh about that. On the right's a bedroom without any beds, and it worked out very well because they end up sleeping in sleeping bags. And I think that that's part of Mexicans' life on it, the sense of humor. Light is another thing that intrigues me very much. Not only natural light, artificial light. I think that the possibilities are endless. And every time I make an attempt with light and I play with it, I'm really very happy, and I find it exciting, the combination of natural and artificial light. On the photograph on the right, there's a combination of natural light and artificial, and on the left, the game of light of different spaces is really intriguing for us. How a window or a treated of the intake of a light can change the whole space. Those stripes on the wall are created by light, and I think I don't pay enough attention to light in order to really take advantage of it. How it can change the whole space according to the hour of the day, the orientation, the kind of light you have in the place you are building. Water is another thing that to me is vital. It's a very important element in our life, and in architecture it permits movement and is part of it. These are the pools of a hotel in the Pacific Oceans, in which I decided not to do a pool. I thought that it was much better to do fountains, in which it happens that people swim. So we create a series of aqueducts and waters. This blends for a very beautiful, not beautiful, but a very special story. It's not a beautiful story. In the budget, we were able to have a pool per room in this hotel.